I want to give a big thank you to all my patrons, and I'll be doing a Kingsguard roll call after today's video.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Network, everyone. My name is, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and usually I do not film a review right after I read a book, mainly due to recency bias. Sometimes I want to take a minute, kind of process my thoughts, calm down a little bit. I am like breathing kind of hard right now because I'm exhausted. I just finished book 2 in the Dandelion Dynasty, which is Wall of Storms, and I could not wait. I had to come down here and I had to film this review. I had to set up the camera, do everything. Didn't plan on doing this at all, but I have to talk about Wall of Storms. I have to talk about this book. I'm going to do a non-spoiler section, and then I'm going to do a spoiler section because there's no way you can read this book and not want to talk about things that have transpired. With that said, this no spoiler section, I know some of you maybe watched my Grace of Kings review. If you did not, I do encourage you to go check that out to see what this book 1 in that series is all about, or this series is all about. But I also think I need to talk to you about Wall of Storms. I need to talk to you about book 2 of the Dandelion Dynasty. And I know there's this exhaustive thing of, well, wait to this book and it gets better and it's thousands and thousands of pages. I loved Grace of Kings. I thought it was really good. There are some people it's not going to work for because of the distance narrative. However, Wall of Storms, and I'm like, listen, you're going to get all of the recency bias here, but I have been thinking about some of these statements since 50% of the way through book 2 of Dandelion Dynasty. Wall of Storms is an early contender for book of the year for me. It is not only the best book 2 that I have ever read, and that includes all of my favorites like Words of Radiance, Royal Assassin, Clash of Kings, Enemy of God, all of those things. This is the best book 2 I've ever read. I think this is also one of the best books I have just ever read in general. And without a doubt, is the best political fantasy, dynasty building drama story ever that I've read, at least. And I know that a lot of these statements are subjective, so I'll probably get some disagreements down below, and that's fine, but I just want to get my feelings out. Because after all, this channel was about finding the next best reads, right? That's what this is all about. And I have found one. Wall of Storms, like this is a prime example of why I read. Why I not just read fantasy, but fiction. Why I read in general is to have fist-pumping moments, to stand up while I'm reading, to yell out, to ponder things, to get emotional. It hits on every single range of things that I look on a checklist of a 5-star read. This is a 6 out of 5 for me. I'm being very hyperbolic, but I mean it, at least in this very moment. Wall of Storms adds on to every single thing in the Grace of Kings. It adds on to the world of Dara. It expands on characters that exist that were a little bit of a minor role in the first book and takes them to new levels. It introduces new characters that have now become some of my favorite of the 2 books. In a very short span of time, Ken Liu has one of the best realized worlds I've read in fantasy. As well realized with a history and mythical tales, just like Westeros, just like Middle Earth, all of these things. I think that Dara and everything that's included in the Dandelion Dynasty at book 2 should be mentioned along with the greats. If the quality of this keeps up, I think it would become a top 5 series for me. And I've read a lot of stuff that I love, but this book just captivated me. It has so many moments that will blow your mind. It also has moments of intimacy. And the thing that a lot of people talk about the Dandelion Dynasty, especially in the Grace of Kings, is the distance narrative. I said it. That's why a lot of people will bounce off this book and maybe the series. However, Wall of Storms feels so much more personalized. The narrative is a lot closer knit to the characters. And while there are still flashbacks of explaining like where characters came from and how this all came to be, it does feel a lot more intimate and, what we're used to in modern and classical fantasy. Wall of Storms blew away all my expectations. I was very, very hyped for this book, and I am concerned that with these really big statements that I'm making, that people will pick it up and not have the same experience that I did. But I would be lying to you if I didn't react like this. I feel my heart's still racing, and I feel exhausted after reading this book. The people that have been listening to me update, whether it's my Discord or personal messages with people like Bookborn, I just said, I'm exhausted. This book was absolutely insane. It takes more left turns than maybe any other book that I've read. And the world expansion was so clever and out of nowhere. And it blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. And Ken Liu is one of the smartest writers in all of fantasy. I really believe this. One thing that Ted Chiang did in Stories of Your Life and Others is that he took really, really interesting concepts, broke them down, explained them to me, and then made them work within this story, right? And can have plot surprises, all these types of things with the information that makes a lot of sense. In sci-fi, we see that a ton because we actually know how the world works for the most part. You can use physics, you can use biology, all these cool things, right? Ken Liu is explaining things in a very logical way in a fantasy world that does not exist and making that interesting. And I've seen this attempted in many books in fantasy, trying to come up with these ideas, trying to come up with logic to varying degrees of success, but never to the level of what I've seen in Wall of Storms. Resources matter. This is wartime. There's a lot of conflict. There's a ton of political drama. And at the root of all of that, it's not just about who's the baddest, who's the strongest, who's the smartest, as far as like scheming goes. But at the heart of the story, there is nature, there are resources, there's invention, there's innovation, there's machinery. I just am so impressed with his imagination and at the ability to take things that make sense in our world, by the way. During times of war and of political intrigue, we see huge leaps in technology and huge leaps in invention. And that happens in Dara. That happens in the Dandelion Dynasty. But it doesn't feel just like a one-for-one for our world. Some of the most fantastical things in this story make sense. They make sense in the context of Dara and of this world that we're in. And it's just really blown me away. I hope I'm making somewhat sense right now as I ramble on, but it just feels like I'm living in this world that's so well realized. And I am so attached to the cast of characters. And the way that the plot formulates is so impressive through third-person omniscient, because this is the litmus test. Whenever people say, I like politics in my fantasy, I like political fantasy and intrigue, all these things, everyone says that, but like sometimes we only want it to be a part of the story. It is at the core of Dandelion Dynasty and the core of Wall of Storms. And through the third-person omniscient perspective, we lose a little bit of the mystery because we actually see the plans of other people, right? We see all of the thoughts and the characters scheming. However, the challenge that comes with that and part of the fun, Ken Liu is so smart that he makes it all work. He shows you all the pieces and says, watch how I maneuver these people. And then you get this sense of dread building up as you watch the politics unfold and the scheming unfold. And you don't get that from third person limited. In fact, you can kind of jump leaps of logic because you can say, oh, well, they were actually thinking this and you didn't know because you were in this person's head. You get everyone's perspective, everyone's head in third person omniscient. And in itself, I think that is a little bit of a bigger challenge. And I think that even knowing some of the mystery and knowing characters are about to be screwed over, it's like I still have all this tension because I care about the character it's happening to and I want to see how they react. This is a extremely powerful flex of the third-person omniscient perspective, which in itself is not that popular anymore in fantasy. For someone to choose it and then use it to this amount of success and to this amount of tension and build up and payoff is masterful. Ken Liu is probably going to end up being one of my favorite authors of all time, like if this continues. And we'll see, because you got to judge each book individually and then everything as a whole. But Wall of Storms is just so good. It's just one of the best books I've read. And in closing non-spoiler thoughts, I just want to say I also think that some of the fantastical tropes that revolve around gender and sexist acts are actually flipped on their heads in this series in a way that I haven't seen it done before, where it's not so on the nose that you know what they're, oh, that's what they're doing there. But like you subtly think about how things are unfolding and realizing that he is just trope busting all over the plot. And it's just so phenomenal. There's something for everyone here. I think the ladies in this story are absolutely fantastic. I also think that there's a wide variety of male representation here that is excellent. And I just challenge you, if The Grace of Kings was just okay for you, even maybe if it bounced off, maybe give this a shot. Because I really believe that this is one of the most dramatic books I've ever read, and a book that has just blown my mind. And I would like other people to be blown away and to share their thoughts with me, which I know everyone that's read this that has really enjoyed it, which I think everyone I know that has read this has loved it. They were just dying to hear my reactions because Ken Liu just takes the gloves off and just starts to mold this immaculate world that I really can't say much else without any spoilers, but the world just opens up so much. And even the gods are a little bit surprised, and it's just phenomenal. So, yes, that's going to be the end of the no spoiler section of this review. It was kind of a gush. I'm sorry if I'm rambling. I hope it wasn't too awful to watch, but if anything, this is genuine enjoyment. This is me reading a book that says this is why you read, and that is so powerful to me. And Ken Liu's Wall Storms is excellent and definitely going to be in the contender for Book of the Year for me. Wow. But now I'm going to get into spoilers. Hit like if you're going to check out of the video now. Hit like and hit subscribe if you enjoyed it. If you dislike, you can dislike it. And, I'm going to have more Ken Liu stuff coming down the pipe and reading other stuff. I'd love to have you around. But if you were only here for the no spoiler section, you got to get out because I'm about to react to some major events that happened in Wall of Storms that would spoil massive parts of the Dandelion Dynasty. So I'll see you later. I hope you're good. I hope you're safe and all that good stuff. I'll see you all next time. Let's talk about spoilers. Okay, we are in the spoiler section. I will have this tagged on here for Wall of Storms, Book 2 of the Dandelion Dynasty. Get out. That's your final warning. Okay, so first off, Zomi is one of my favorite additions to any cast ever, or Mimi as she's referred to earlier in the story. The interaction of her with the gods and the lightning hitting her leg and all these things, I was so invested in Zomi. What a great introduction of a character. And on top of that, this is, at its root, even towards the end of the story, a succession story of what happens once the Emperor dies. I am here for that every single day of the week, and Liu does it so well. And for all of the oh my god moments in this book, the body count's absurd, right? I'm gonna miss some stuff. These are kind of me just reacting. This is like your greatest hits of Wall of Storms. Hopefully I don't miss your favorites. But when Ruthie gets his head caved in, when they meet the barbarians, and he's trying to do the right thing, and I can just tell he's gonna die. I'm like, oh no, he's a fool. These barbarians are, without a doubt, gonna murder him. And he gets his head caved in. He had been sexist and he had been nasty at some points to Zomi. But you know what? This is a character that I did have a little bit endearment for. It's like your out-of-date, super old school uncle, right? He's a numbskull, he annoys you, but you don't want to go to his funeral. And that's kind of what happened here. And it's like, oh man, Ruthie dying was such a wake-up call to be like, these barbarians are going to mess things up. And I got to give credit where credit's due. The Lukyu and Tenro, if I'm saying these names wrong, I'm sorry, but I thought them as a people were fascinating, and I thought Tenro was such a good antagonist. And this story needed this because I was starting, the court stuff, Gia is starting to piss me off a little bit. The kids are great. Actually, the kids are really, really good in this story, and he should get some credit for that because kids' characters can be real bad. But this was the antagonist that the story needed, and it gave it another plot point to not just be a court drama essentially, and a dynasty drama. It went another layer. And this is why a lot of people say, book 1 has a lot of historical context, yada, yada, yada. And I'm sure you can tie all this back to history, but this is the extra dimension of the story that really got me going. And whenever we get introduced to the Wall of Storms and not being able to go beyond it and how dangerous it is, and then we see the gods' perspectives, and they're saying, we can't even cross the Wall of Storms. And some of them are saying we have to become mortals to cross it. And then at the end of the story, we have a god, which I didn't know who was that at the end of the story, but is choosing to become mortal. Like Tazu did once back in the day as punishment, apparently, to go through the Wall of Storms. This is a huge risk and obviously a massive question mark for Book 3 when I go into it. If you can let me know, unless if I'm not supposed to know until Book 3, let me know now in the comments who the god was that chose to be mortal. Don't tell me if it's in Book 3, though. I'll just figure it out if that's... Just give me a read and find out if that's the case. Rin Koda's suicide really caught me off guard and was very much more impactful than I thought it would be. And this being how Gia is found out by Kuni is just so sudden. And it happens over a few pages. And it all makes good logical sense, but it's just really heart-wrenching because even though Gia was making me mad and she's really good at this game, she's making me mad throughout this whole story, it was I didn't want Kuni to have to go through that, and then he did. And then we find out that Otho had been put to questioning and then he died. And some people say they committed suicide, maybe the questioning went too far, but it's just like in a few pages, everything was crumbling down. And it was very emotional. The 50% point in this book is so foundational to probably the rest of the series, I would imagine, but also just foundational to my experience with this text. It's the fact that we see the court politics start to come, like everything's coming to head, like everyone's going to, like we're cashing those checks, like it's going to get bad. And then you throw in the Liu coup. It's like, it's just so much to take in. And it almost feels like two books in a lot of ways. I felt very similar, and they're totally different books, so don't get it twisted on that. But The Bone Hunters by Steven Erikson is one of the best books I've ever read. And it also had like a mid-climax that could have been its own book. And this kind of feels that way as well. And I've already talked about how much I love Zomi, and I want to talk a little bit more about her, but I can't talk about her without talking about the fact that Oga, her father, and Luan meet, and this is whenever they're at the island, which I can't remember. It's the Agon and the Liuku, and where they're from. I always forget it's on the other side of the Wall of Storms. But then meeting there and then finding out what happened to the old emperor's, escapade out there, or expedition that he sent out to find the immortals and all that stuff. What happens to Oga and Luan is so heart-wrenching. And whenever Luan comes back, I actually believed, for some reason, I thought one of them would make it out. I thought that one of them would survive, and then like they would have to rebuild the relationship. I kind of expected it to be Oga, Zomi's father. I hope I'm remembering his name correctly. But that didn't happen. No, they both died. And it was so heart-wrenching because I am probably attached to Zomi more than any of the other characters, even though I love a lot of the other characters. Like Kuni and Zomi were like my favorites, and Luan. And for Luan to pass was really, really tough. But to see Zomi have to deal with that and then feel so defeated and then also be used by Gia as a political piece is just... Man, Zomi went through it all, guys. I mean, if you really take a look at this book, this is the book of Zomi in a lot of ways. The lightning, and becoming a cripple per se, stealing the past to get into the examination, which the examination drama is phenomenal in this book. To her relationship with Luan and with Gin. And, the fact that she was used against Gin by Gia sucked so much. And I was like, am I going to have to start disliking Zomi? Turns out I didn't, thank God. But everything she goes through with her father passing after finally seeing him, and the goodbye words that she utters to them, just heart-wrenching stuff. And then Zomi falling in love with Thera. I hope I'm remembering her name. Thera, the princess who ends up being named the heir and then going off to the Ogon people. Oh my goodness. Zomi, her character arc is probably one of my favorites in fantasy at this point, and I really am excited and also scared of where she might end up with how brutal the series has been. But Zomi, I can't express to you how much I connected with her character and how all of her plot points were so good. Especially her romance. I was very surprised. Yes, it happens a little quick, but things move fast in this book, and I don't have a single complaint about it. And I thought that the relationship was amazing. Actually, the one moment in this book where I actually got like tears in my eyes, I didn't full out cry, I had teary eyes, was actually when they broke up. That was tough. And Thera and Zomi aren't like super old or anything, but it didn't feel like teen love. I don't know. There was like a genuine appreciation there, and I think it's because Thera is a great character, but Zomi had been through so much. For her to have that relationship, and then for them to talk about how life has many loves, and that this was the first, so it'll always be special, but they will love others. And it's just like that inevitability of moving on that I think a lot of us have went through. I mean, most people have fallen in love with at least one person, or usually multiples, right? And that's a tough thing to let go. And I feel like I could put myself in that situation at that moment. And that, for some reason, really triggered my emotions and got me pretty teary-eyed. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, Luan coming back with his eyes gouged out gutted me, and then double gutted me to see Zomi react. Zomi might be the MVP of this book. In fact, I think she is. And one last note on Zomi that I actually forgot until I looked at my notes is the fact that when Tenryou is burning the people in a circle in front of Kuni, and Kuni is forcing himself to watch, and then, of course, the villagers include Zomi's mother. And the quote is, "She had promised to give her mother a better life, and this is what she had done." That is... I don't know. I mean, that was so heavy. It was very, very heavy. Even now, I mean, what an emotional moment. And Ugh, God, Zomi's been through the ringer, folks. All right, enough about Zomi. So I'm talking about like these emotional moments, talking about political intrigue, I'm gushing and stuff, but this book also has moments of triumph and of hope that I find to be so fist-pumpingly just amazing. They are all inspiring. And whenever Soto, who is silently just such an amazing character, it doesn't get a ton of page time, but has a big role. Whenever Soto basically shows Gin, who's been screwed over by Gia and is now a traitor and all these things. And I love the fact that Gin just didn't say, okay, guys, I'm going to take the army and I'm going to lead and it'll be all good. She's like, no, you've hurt me. My legacy's ruined. I like that. I like her showing a little bit of restraint from that. With that said, whenever Soto takes her and shows her that the people of Dara are willing to go and fight an unwinnable fight, ooh, boy, was I hyped. I stood up, I pumped my fist, I sent out some messages, I was all in. I could have ran through a brick wall, folks. When she has this sword, she sheaves it up and people are just cheering, fight, fight, fight. That's what I'm here for. Ugh. Jin is so good. What a great character. I believe in her martial prowess, but she also has a human side. She's not just a badass like female warrior. She's so much more than that. She was more than that to Kuni. And seeing her in that final battle and how they didn't reference her as Gin, they referred to her with her last name, right? And I'm forgetting, it's Mizodi, I think. But all of that in her last moments when she flies her ship into another ship and then Zomi wires her body up to make it look like she's still commanding and that she is the one that had slain Tenryu. Sorry, I messed up the name. Tenryo. Whenever it shows that Jin had slain him and that, the sparks are going off and the flags waving. They're like, oh my God, Captain's still here. Commander's still here. What a moment. And also like Zumi doing that, like pretty much like electricity thing, and it bouncing between the bodies, going right into his heart and stopping it. Like, that's dope. Come on. All the explanation for all of that stuff actually ended up mattering and paying off. If anything, I wish it would have been used just even a little bit more. But that whole moment in her arc of the sacrifice that she did, man, it was hard. It was hard. And again, I said I was done with Zomi, but Zomi was also very instrumental in that moment too. She's MVP, guys. There's no doubt about it. But Jin, I call her both. But Jin was such a monumental character, and it sucks so bad that she's gone. But what an absolute legend. I just talked about kind of like the electricity thing and all the science that's in here. I won't sit here and pretend like I understand every intricate piece of it. That's just not the case. But I love the fact that the dragon-like creatures are actually explained and how that they can breathe fire. But they have antlers, by the way, so I don't think they're a one-for-one with dragons, from what I can tell. But the fact that they have like the holes where their teeth like go in, but there's like food stuck in there, so it's decayed. Their teeth have little holes, but then they find out that they clamp their jaws to like kind of like ignite and then breathe fire, and then all the limitations that come with that. Listen, that's not going to be everyone's bag, and honestly, it's usually not mine. I love the explanations for this. For him to logically step through how an animal could breathe fire, and then also that be a part of the strategy for the people who are fighting these ridiculous beasts. So cool. So cool. And that is why I really do think Ken Liu might be the smartest writer in fantasy today. Tanvanaki and Timu is such a flip on what we usually see in fantasy. We usually see like the princess or the daughter of the king is being drugged and abused and taken advantage of and assaulted and then gaslighted and then used as a puppet and all these things. But it's flipped this time. And a female is doing that to Timu, who is the prince, right? And then also that cashing in on all of the turmoil and kind of tension that we have between Kuni and him really came to the forefront and really worked for me in a lot of ways, not just flipping that trope on its head, but also giving to me a little bit more to do, because I mean, he was easily my least favorite son, and I think it was Kuni's as well. But it's sad, but it does have a lot of worth here in the story, and I think it's one of the amazing ways that Ken Liu is like subtly just destroying some of the usual things we see in fantasy when it comes to gender roles. And then we have like the final moments of Kuni. And his little monologue at the end, naming Thera his heir. I had hope maybe that Kuni jumped into the sea, and maybe like at the end when we see the Aegon guy, Aegon whatever, get thrown up on the sea by the whale. I was hoping that it was Kuni. I was like, maybe it's Kuni. It wasn't. Kuni's dead. And that sucks. That sucks so bad. But what a powerful moment that was. And Kunigaru, respect to him and his beer belly and everything else, because he was one hell of a character. And I think he tried to be the best emperor possible. And that was a gut punch. I mean, there's so many gut punches. Like, I can sit here and just say that for everything, because this book's body count is ridiculous. And I have to say, No to Me is my least favorite character by a mile. With Gia, I hate her, but I think she has some good motivations. When I say hate, I think she's a phenomenally crafted character. I just mean in the terms of reacting. She makes me real mad. No to Me, when he turns on Doru, and he just can't get enough. Like, he can't just be, surviving. He should have had his head lopped off, but he's got to scheme, and he's got to try to make his way up. And when he turns on the people, and he kills Doru and all these things, I'm just sitting there, and I'm just, like, frothing at the mouth. Like, please, someone, Jin, somebody spear him through the heart. And I look forward to, hopefully, his demise in the coming books. And the Agon, or however I'm going to pronounce it, the people who fought with the Yuku back on their continent. Yeah, Takval, I believe was his name. I really like that whole whale thing. At first, I was like, oh, it's like Jonah and the whale. I'm like, whatever. Like, that's kind of improbable. But then you get the God scene after it that kind of explains it. And you're like, okay, that's really cool. I think Takval and the Agon people coming into this story, and then having Thera having to, unfortunately, leave Zomi, and then leave court to go get these people, right? To make this big alliance wherever they can help them grow the dragon-like creatures that I'm forgetting their name of, the Garanithias or something, I can't remember. And people, my notes are a mess. I didn't organize for this at all. I literally came down here and just filmed it because I was fired up. So forgive me for not being on the ball with these names. But Takval and Thera is going to be really interesting going forward. And I like that piece of the story. I like that we see the gods behind it. I like that we see a god now taking in the mortalhood. All this stuff that kind of results at the end of this big conflict is really, really neat. And I've already mentioned Gia. I've said I didn't like her. And here's the thing. Her trying to get Rosanna to kill herself was damn vile. Like, and you know what? I know someone's going to explain to me about how it's actually like this good thing and it has to happen or whatever, okay? Rosanna didn't do anything. Rosanna was passive this whole time. But just for the illusion of a conflict or illusion, a possibility that Firo might want to take the throne and it's Rosanna's kid. I mean, come on, Gia. Like, come on. We're talking about hypotheticals here. Ugh, it's so frustrating. And then, Rosanna I was so happy whenever she figured out, like, oh, Gia's trying to kill me. And I'm thinking, okay, that's going to stop here. And then we're going to see that conflict resolve in the next book. Or maybe Rosanna is actually going to run away or something like this, right? No. Gia kills Rosanna. And listen, I know it's a great character and whatnot, but I'm rooting against Gia so hard. And it sucks because, like, Liu even shows, like, that Gia is a good person to back the throne whenever Firo wants to kind of make an impulsive decision to sink some ships and whatnot. Gia makes the right call. So I'm not saying that she isn't good for the throne and maybe even good for Dara as a whole, but she's a vile person. And I guess if someone has to commit the sins, it's her. But I like her. And then, like, the nice little chef's kiss at the end of the book that made me feel a little bit more comfortable with all the distraught, terrible things that he put us through was the fact that Luan had put in the secret code about the Wall of Storms opening, not actually being when it was, and then Zomi finding it out and having a closure to their relationship was really the beginning of the book and then the end of the book. And it's like this beautiful encapsulated relationship and arc for Zomi and Luan at the end. And all of the philosophy we hear that Zomi and him talk about matters at the end. And it's such a subtle thing, but I think it's a very important piece of epic fantasy whenever you do go into nitty-gritty details and you have these big, vast ideas and philosophies for them to pay off. And it paid off here. And that's really it. Those are all my raw reactions. I know this is a little scatterbrained. I know some pronunciations are off. I do apologize, but this is just me, like, being a reader and enjoying something and having a visceral reaction to it, and I needed to get down here and, like, vomit this out to you. If you stuck all the way to the end of this video, I appreciate you so much. And thank you, because this is one of the most genuinely enjoyable books that I've ever read, and that's what this is. This is what this channel is all about for me. So this was awesome. This is like a callback to home mission, right, for me. In a lot of ways. Sometimes it can get a little stagnant whenever you do reviews, because you read so many books and stuff's good and you can acknowledge it and it has moments and you're like, that's very cool. But not always does it grab a hold of you like this. And this book did that to the maximum amount of effect. And it's why it's one of the best books I've ever read. So Wallstorms is excellent. If you like this video, hit like. If you disliked, you can hit dislike. If you loved it, you can think about subscribing if you haven't already. I do have a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. I will be doing more Dandelion Dynasty content down the line. I would love to try to reach out to Ken Liu and interview him. I have a massive amount of respect for him as an author, especially after this book. I already did after Grace of Kings, but this really topped that in every single way possible. But thank you so much for checking out this video. I appreciate you. Until I see you next time, be good, be safe. Remember to always keep turning the page.
Big shout out to all my patrons, my Wildlings Knights watching Kingsguard. My Kingsguard include Henrik, Brendan, Nick, Oscar, Stuart, Josephine, Ikaika, Amanda, RJ, Shad, Nicoletta, Tanner, Jennifer, Garrick, Frank, Jay, Sarah, Pat, Kevin, Ryan, Michael, Terrence, Wade, Darren, FM, Derry, Boss, Mitch, Sebastian, Benjamin, and Joe Bot. Thank you all so much. You're the best.